4 children born into the shadow of a crown. One became king, one outran kidnappers, one flew into war and scandal, one vanished into quiet duty. They were raised in palaces, trained for duty, and watched by millions. But after the world buried Britain's longest reigning monarch, what became of the children she left behind? This isn't a fairy tale, it's a royal reckoning. From headlines to hospital rooms, exile to coronation, this is the untold aftermath of Queen Elizabeth II's heirs. Whatever happened to her children, stay with us. The story is only just beginning. Before we dive in, if you love deep dives into the lives behind the headlines, hit that subscribe button. It helps us keep making videos like this one. And while you're here, drop a comment. Where in the world are you watching from, and what time is it right now? Let's see just how far the crown's shadow really reaches.
1. King Charles III. It began, as it always does, with a crown. Not placed upon the head, but looming overhead, waiting. Charles Philip Arthur George was born in 1948, and from the very first cry in Buckingham Palace, the future weighed down on him like a stone cathedral. The boy who would become King Charles III didn't choose the role. He inherited it like an heirloom sword, beautiful, symbolic, and razor-sharp. He waited for it longer than any heir in British history. From the outside, Charles's life seemed set to script. Educated at Gordonston, invested as Prince of Wales in 1969 with an event so dramatic it nearly eclipsed his actual coronation decades later, and trained in the fine art of waiting. He wasn't just the son of a monarch, he was a monarch in training for over 70 years. Imagine being born into a job interview that lasts your entire life. But behind the polished portraits and royal wave was a man full of contradictions. A prince who talked to plants, a future king who wrote letters to ministers, the infamous Black Spider memos, handwritten with the urgency of a man who couldn't quite sit on the sidelines. In 2015, after a Supreme Court ruling, the public got a glimpse of Charles's private frustrations and interventions. It sparked debate. Was this a concerned citizen using his voice, or a monarch in waiting overstepping? For Charles, the environment was never a fringe cause. It was a lifelong obsession. Before climate change was political, before organic became a Whole Foods buzzword, Charles was practicing it at Highgrove. He spoke of soil as sacred, landscapes as legacy. The press mocked him at first, then the science caught up. But the public relationship was always a complicated dance. For every act of philanthropy, like founding the Prince's Trust in 1976 to help disadvantaged youth, a charity that would quietly rebrand as the King's Trust in 2024, there was a counterbalance of controversy, and none more seismic than his marriage to Lady Diana Spencer. The fairy tale exploded in real time. Married in 1981, divorced by 1996, the union of Charles and Diana unraveled under the global microscope.
Their 2 sons, William and Harry, became the most watched children on Earth. And the aftermath? A generation of distrust, not just in Charles as a father, but in the monarchy itself. Yet time does what time always does. It softened the edges. In 2005, Charles married Camilla, once the most vilified woman in Britain, in a quiet civil ceremony. Their public rehabilitation was slow but undeniable. As the years passed, they became less of a scandal and more of a fixture. By the time Queen Elizabeth II passed in September 2022, few could argue Charles hadn't paid his dues. He was crowned on 6 May 2023, a 74-year-old king in an age of streaming services and shortened attention spans. It was grand, yes, but also surreal. The boy prince was now the sovereign, a monarch of both tradition and transition.
And then, just as the throne finally settled beneath him, came the illness. In early 2024, Buckingham Palace announced that King Charles was undergoing treatment for cancer. Details were scarce. Public appearances were scaled back. Whispers began. Would the king reign in name only? But he returned to selected duties later that year. Thinner, perhaps, quieter, definitely, but still there, still standing. And yet the crown he wears may be lighter than the shadow of the one that came before. Queen Elizabeth was the monarchy's anchor. Charles, he's its question mark. His reign is not about beginnings, but endings, about what the monarchy will be in a world that no longer needs it, yet keeps watching anyway. But if Charles spent a lifetime preparing for kingship, his sister, Anne, spent hers sprinting in the opposite direction. She didn't want the spotlight. She earned it anyway. And what happened next was nothing short of bulletproof. 2. Anne, Princess Royal. She was born 2 years after Charles, and from the moment she arrived, Anne Elizabeth Alice Louise made it clear she wasn't here for the frills. If Charles was the prince prepared for kingship, Anne was the royal who simply got things done. No fuss, no filter, and absolutely no time for nonsense. Anne was the only daughter of Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip, but she never leaned into the dainty or the delicate. Instead, she leaned into horsepower. Literally, horses, mud, medals, and a diary so crammed with engagements it would make a corporate CEO cry. While tabloids obsessed over who wore what tiara and who smiled on which balcony, Anne was already on to the next event, clipboard in hand. By the time most of her siblings were finding their footing, Anne was galloping full speed ahead, first into competitive equestrianism, then into an Olympic-level career. In 1976, she became the first royal to compete in the Olympics, representing Great Britain in eventing at the Montreal Games. It wasn't a PR stunt. It wasn't a ceremonial appearance. It was grit, discipline, and bruises under the royal wardrobe. But if you want to understand the core of Anne, you don't start with her medals or her titles. You start with the car door on the mall. It was 1974. She was 23. Returning from a charity event with her then-husband Mark Phillips when a man blocked her car and attempted to kidnap her at gunpoint. The details are almost surreal. Bullets were fired, her bodyguard was shot, and multiple bystanders were injured. But Anne? She reportedly refused to get out of the car. Not bloody likely, she allegedly snapped. The man was arrested. Anne was unharmed. The event became legend, and in true Anne fashion, she didn't bask in the drama. She moved on, and moved faster. By the 1980s, Anne had carved out her own brand of royalty. In 1987, she was named Princess Royal, a title traditionally given to the monarch's eldest daughter. It's a lifetime designation, and Anne has worn it like armor ever since. Not because she needed the recognition, but because she earned it. While other royals were dragged by headlines, Anne quietly became the monarchy's hardest-working engine. Year after years, Anne has become the institution's quiet backbone. Trusted by the Queen, relied on by Charles, respected even by Republicans. She rarely gives interviews, and when she does, she treats the press like an annoying but tolerable fly. She's been called blunt, no-nonsense, refreshingly unroyal. But above all, she's been consistent. In June 2024, the machine paused, briefly. Anne was hospitalized after a horse-related incident left her with a concussion and minor injuries. For the first time in years, her name trended not for what she was doing, but for where she wasn't. And just as quickly, she returned. Same speed, same style, same Anne. She never wanted the spotlight, but she never backed down from duty. If Charles is the philosopher king, Anne is the battlefield general, sleeves rolled up, boots muddy, and calendar full. But for all Anne's discipline and duty, the next sibling veered off the royal road entirely. Prince Andrew didn't just step into controversy, he crashed into it. And what followed was the slow-motion collapse of a royal once known as the Queen's favorite. 3. Prince Andrew, Duke of York. He was born in 1960, a full decade after Charles and Anne, and for a long time Prince Andrew seemed to be the monarchy's golden boy. As the Queen's third child and second son, Andrew occupied an unusual space. Not the heir, but not obscure either. The press in the 1980s branded him Action Man, the handsome young royal who flew helicopters, wore his uniform like a movie star, and smiled for cameras with the easy charm of someone born to be adored. It started with the Navy. Andrew joined the Royal Naval College at Dartmouth in 1979 and became a helicopter pilot. By the time Britain went to war in the South Atlantic in 1982, Andrew was 22 and on active service aboard HMS Invincible. He flew Sea King helicopters on anti-submarine patrols, casualty evacuations, and decoy missions. The tabloids loved it. A prince in danger, a royal doing his duty. For the Queen, it was both pride and worry. For Andrew, it was the making of his early image, brave, youthful, and relatable in a way his older brother never quite was. After the Falklands War, Andrew returned a decorated officer and a national favorite. His 1986 wedding to Sarah Ferguson, the flame-haired Fergie, was billed as the monarchy's next fairy tale. Crowds lined the mall, television cameras rolled, and for a moment the Windsors looked like a modern, happy family. They had 2 daughters, Princess Beatrice in 1988 and Princess Eugenie in 1990, and Andrew seemed poised to take on more senior royal roles. But unlike Anne, who built a reputation on hard work and consistency, Andrew's public life became patchier. After leaving the Navy in 2001, he accepted a position as the UK's Special Representative for International Trade and Investment, a kind of roving ambassador for British business. It should have been a win, a prince using his connections to open doors. But over time, Andrew's friendships and business dealings drew criticism, and his role became controversial. By 2011, he stepped down. What followed was a slow and public unraveling. The press began to scrutinize his associations with certain wealthy and scandal-stained figures. A disastrous BBC interview in 2019, intended to proximity, collided with scrutiny and accountability. By 2025, the headlines extended beyond Andrew to his former wife Sarah, Duchess of York. Though long divorced, their close friendship and continued cohabitation kept them linked in the public imagination. In September 2025, several charities cut ties with Sarah after reports about an old email related to one of Andrew's former associates surfaced. For Andrew, it was yet another reminder that stepping back from royal duties didn't mean stepping out of the spotlight. Today, Andrew lives in a twilight zone of monarchy. Still a son of a queen, still a duke, but no longer an active royal. He occasionally appears at family ceremonies, but has no official role and no clear public rehabilitation plan. The boy who once flew sea kings into danger now spends most of his time at Royal Lodge in Windsor. Out of sight, out of duty, but never entirely out of mind. His story is a cautionary tale of how quickly royal favor can evaporate. Where Anne built a fortress of duty, Andrew built a house of cards. And yet not all of Elizabeth's sons ended up in the same shadow. Her youngest, Edward, took a quieter path, one that would eventually lead to the title their father once held and a steady, if understated, public life. 4. Prince Edward, Duke of Edinburgh. In a family where spotlights either blind or burn, Prince Edward somehow managed to walk between the beams. Born in 1964, Edward Anthony Richard Louis was the youngest of Queen Elizabeth II's children, and for most of his early life he was also the most elusive. He didn't command the press like Charles, ride into war like Andrew, or carve headlines through sheer force of will like Anne. Instead, he seemed to sidestep the drama entirely. Maybe it was because the crown felt more distant. Maybe it was the nature of being the youngest in a family already full of dominant personalities. Or maybe it was because Edward knew something the others didn't, that the real way to survive the monarchy wasn't to chase relevance, but to define your own version of it. After Eton and Cambridge, Edward did something distinctly unroyal. He went into entertainment. In the early 1990s, he founded Ardent Productions, a television company focused on documentaries, including ones about the royal family itself. The media raised eyebrows. A royal making shows about royalty? It was ambitious, perhaps too much so. The real scandal came in 2001 when an Ardent film crew was spotted filming Prince William at the University of St. Andrews, a place where the press had agreed to give William privacy. The incident triggered criticism from both inside and outside the family. The Queen was reportedly displeased. William was reportedly furious. Edward, under pressure, stepped away from the company in 2002 and pivoted full-time into royal duties. But if his early media career was rocky, his transition to full-time working royal was smooth, even graceful. Edward began taking on more public roles, especially those tied to youth and education. Alongside his wife, Sophie Rhys-Jones, whom he married in 1999, Edward slowly became a reliable, even respected figure within the firm. The title game told its own story. Upon marriage, he became the Earl of Wessex, a somewhat surprising choice as the title had not been used in centuries. But behind the scenes, a longer-term plan was already in motion. Prince Philip, the Queen's husband and Edward's father, had expressed a wish that Edward inherit his title, the Duke of Edinburgh, one day. When Philip passed in 2021, the Duke character, leadership, and community service among young people. Edward now serves as its public face, continuing a legacy that mixes royal duty with real-world impact. His engagements rarely make front-page headlines, but they happen, consistently, all over the UK and abroad. In an institution increasingly wary of scandal, consistency is currency. His personal life has reflected the same ethos. He and Sophie have maintained one of the most stable marriages in modern royal history. Their daughter, Lady Louise Windsor, remains largely out of the spotlight, focusing on education and low-profile appearances. Their son James, now a teenager, occasionally attends royal events but is not considered a senior royal. Edward isn't flashy, he isn't scandalous, and he doesn't seem to care. In a way, he represents the monarchy's future not through grandeur, but through adaptability, showing how royal relevance can evolve from crown-wearing to cause-working. As the House of Windsor reshuffles itself post-Elizabeth, balancing duty, scandal, illness, and succession, Edward is the quiet, steady hand, the one who didn't break under the spotlight, the one who didn't need to fight for titles or press. And yet, even in this low-key role, Edward's story still reflects the larger truth about the Queen's children. 4 siblings, 4 wildly different paths, all shaped by the same invisible architecture of monarchy. But what binds them all, Charles, Anne, Andrew, Edward, isn't just blood or title. It's what they inherited from their mother, a woman who ruled for 70 years with a stiff upper lip and an ironclad sense of duty. And now, as Britain moves forward, the real question isn't just what happened to her children, it's what happens next to the crown they were born beneath.